Bruce, I know you did a lot of the stuff on his show, so here's your turn.
Let me see. Well, I came to Channel 3 in '62 and stayed for 38 years. Went through 3 owners. Started out with the Travelers, then Post Newsweek, and finally Meredith, and we went downhill the whole time. The best part was when Travelers was there. I'll make this short, but just a couple of stories. One, there was an announcer, nobody's mentioned him, Ed Anderson, who used to do the weekend news. Well, Ed had emphysema. And if you gave him more than 3 on-camera stories, by the time he was into the second story, he was so they had to, the director used to have to throw in a film or something in there so Ed could get his breath back. The other thing was, Walter Cronkite at the time, at the end of his show, would sit back and light up his pipe. Well, Ed thought that would be a great touch. So he'd speed through the last couple of stories, so at the end he could sit back and light up his pipe. Well, we knew what he was doing, so we'd give him the time cue late, so he never had a chance to sit down and light up his pipe. You're talking about breaking Dick up. I have 2 stories for that. The first was Dick did election returns. And I would always say to Dick, so what are the returns from Basra? So what I do is a lot of times we'd be into it, there'd be 10 seconds, I'd say, 10 seconds, Dick. What are the returns from Basra? And of course we'd come back up and he was in stitches. This was years later, when he went, I think it was KSS, was at the Mansion, right?
Yeah.
You probably don't remember this, but we were doing a commercial. And we'd set up in one of the studios and Dick was going to be the announcer on it. So we got all ready to go and the director said, roll the tape. So we rolled the tape and the director says, action. And they go to Dick and he's flat down laughing. And the director says, what's the matter? And Dick says, I know what he's thinking. That's it. You were so great.
John Perillo, come up here. The actual returns from Basra was that Sam Gatenson won. Sam Gatenson is from Basra, Connecticut, yes. And, he was the congressman for the 2nd District for many, many years. So John Perillo, give us a whole different slant, because neither in the TV crew nor in the announcing staff, tell us about yourself.
Mine's going to be very short. I just had some dental work. and I sound like a Bugs Bunny. So, I'll leave it up to somebody else to carry the tube. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And speaking of Johns, John Reno and Patty, they can come up as a team. Patty McEnroe was one of the tour guides along with Joe Everett, Kai Everett.
I have to sit next to her.
Crowley Auto Group website misspelled the name Kia. Can you believe that, a 3-letter word? And they spelled it K-A-I, which is how I believe Joe Everett spelled her name. Kai Everett. John and Patty, up here where you can get on camera. And John and Patty forever have been taking care of the attendance records and the name cards for these very often reunions, and that's why we have to keep on turning the cards in so they haven't got to buy new ones.
Okay. And the hard work of Dave Kaplan over here, who actually prints all these out and keeps things flowing very nicely for us. We want to thank him. He's doing a super job, and hope you never end it, Dave. Keep with us. And well, we've had a lot of good stories here. I'm not much of a storyteller, but part of the engineering group that, as a combined engineer for radio and television, it spans 43 years. I started with WTIC radio in 1961 when a good friend of mine, Hal Schnurr, after, and obviously you just heard we've lost him this year and it's been a real shocker for us, asked me to come up and look at WTIC after getting out of the Air Force. Prior to that, it was 4 years of the Air Force, various locations around the whole world, and then several years of radio engineering for radio stations around the state of Connecticut. But we started building Broadcast House in 1961, and you see all these lovely pictures up here, and realize that you're in a state of shock when you go down to the corner where it was built, and you see it absolutely in rubble to the ground. After what we put into that place, I mentioned Hal Schnur because he was one of the engineers that actually worked with us and was so particular about how everything was put together. I was putting together one of these racks that Arnie mentioned, I guess.
What a rack.
What a rack. And he says, you know, when you put all those screws into those pieces of equipment in the rack, this rack, for instance, like this, that was a rack, by the way, in the radio edit room where the ETs, recording rooms, right, master control, where we played ETs. One of my first jobs there was with Ed Kingsley, and he says, put together, this was in the old building, all of these turntables from Fairchild. We're going to put them down at Channel 61. These Fairchild turntables. They were great turntables, but the problem was they all wowed. So I was the wow expert to go in there and make sure that you cranked these adjustments so that there was no wow. So that when we went into FM and played all that beautiful music, Lonnie Jareb, does anybody remember Lonnie Jareb?
Yeah.
She would continually call us in for support to make sure she was pushing the right buttons or that turntable was playing exactly right, but she was quite a piece. Well, anyway, so Hal Schnur, so when you put the equipment in this rack, make sure that when all the screws are put in, that all the screw slots were all lined up, all the way down. So I never forgot that, and it was incredible. And some of the people that you don't hear about in the old days of radio, the person that hired me after that was Al Jackson, who was just a gem of a person, and we certainly missed him, and we want to remember him. And then from the TV side, I actually worked for both radio and television, and in the 1983 segment became chief engineer for Channel 3. But the person that really you don't hear too much about anymore, who was so instrumental in putting that station together, that worked nights and days and was such a great supervisor to have people work for him, was Steve Myers. I mean, this Steve Myers was a champ. And we really miss him, and he deserves a lot of credit for what went into that station. Yeah, he went to ESPN and was responsible for training up a lot of people from Channel 3 and radio to go there. But anyway, it was quite a career, and I was talking to Dick Bertel earlier and saying that we certainly, the years that we spent in broadcasting were the highlights of our generation, and there will probably be never a generation that will spend time in broadcasting as we did. We worked at the right time, there's no question about it. Today, everything is, well, you know how it is. One of the great things about television, of course, was digital television came along. Digital television came along, made some great pictures, but you can't get it in your place half of the time. And that's because of the way the digital television system works, whereas if the quality of the signal isn't quite strong enough, it's either there or not there. And unless you're on cable, you won't appreciate it. Today, fully retired, worked a little bit with SBE, which is the Society of Broadcast Engineers, and we spend the rest of our time bringing up grandchildren. My wife will tell you about the 3 grandchildren we had. But anyway, we enjoy seeing everybody at these reunions and hope that we can keep it up and healthy for some time to come. And since you have a nice story about your career, I'll turn it back over to Patricia here.
Well, as long as we're telling Ranger Andy events, I do have one. I think you had me doing this some other place, but I was one of those tour guides. and we would bring everybody around, and yes, you did look like you were in fish bowls. And I also, at that time, doing the tours, I did work with Katie Mahoney, who couldn't be here tonight, and I did work with Kai, or Joe Everett, and it was a group of us gals. I don't know, you know, everything about the tour guides, but when they came up with the idea of tour guides, I happened to be in guest relations, and we were sent down to NBC to learn how they ran their tour guides. So we were down there for a day of training. Of course, we all went out to lunch and had a wonderful time for ourselves. But we did take the tour. And then we were sent over to be outfitted by American Airlines. We had to dress like American Airlines. And that's when trouble came about, and feelings were hurt, and some people did leave because of that, and which was a shame. But so got into the tour business, and one of my days I was touring a group around, and we would come to the dressing rooms, and people, you know, that aren't aware of that, they, oh, that's a wonderful thing, you know, what is that? So I would open doors, and they would see the lights, and this is where they put on their makeup. We would tell them all of that. Well, this one day I did that, and he was never there, you know. We opened doors, there was never anybody in there. But this one day, I opened the door, and there was Ranger Andy in his boxer shorts. And he was like, oh, and I said, oh, and there's Ranger Andy. I mean, what are you going to say? You have to say something. Well, we were, yeah, that was one of my little Ranger stories. But
Double bucket.
oh, triple. I also, I had many jobs there. I started out with working for Bernard Muller's, and then went everywhere. But anyhow, yes, I did. I had to, one of my jobs was I sent out tickets to this show, to the children's show, Ranger Andy, and for Jim Thompson. But in Andy's run, I sent out, it was triple stamped. Anyhow, we had really groups of 20, but that day we had 3 times that. We had all these kids coming, 60. And the first, they would start the show, he would look out and say, oh, who's coming down the trail? Well, we didn't tell him that was going to happen, but the floor crew knew, and they did accommodate the children. But he couldn't believe all these kids, they just kept coming and coming and coming. I heard about that one too, but that was okay. But back now to the present, I would like to give a plant to David Kaplan, who has done all the hard work.
Thank you.
For you. Take one.
Beautiful.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And to our good friend Bill Hennessy.
Thank you.
He's grateful to hear. And the best part of my time at Channel 3 was naturally meeting, falling in love, and getting married to John Reno. And
How many years ago was that, Pat?
40. That we're celebrating our 40th year this year. 40 years it was in February. And this since our last reunion, we have become grandparents. Within 24 hours, we had 3 grandsons. Our daughter gave birth to twins, and the very next day, our son had a son. So we're very happy. We're enjoying being grandparents. Wish they had done it 10 years ago, but we're keeping up with them. Anyhow, we have 1-year-olds, 3. It's like having triplets. It's wonderful. We're blessed, and we're very happy, and happy to be here with you.
Stand by for Tony Riggs, Louise Russell, and Jim Stewart. So, Tony, it's your turn. Speaking of long marriages, my wife and I have been married, it'll be 59 years in December. But on our 50th anniversary cruise, she brought her attorney, I brought my attorney. So the question is, after 59 years, do you think it'll last?